What happens when a sitting U.S. Senator publicly accuses the Secretary of the Army of erasing real American heroes just to bring back Confederate names? In a heated hearing, Senator Tim Kaine calls out a plan to strip 4 decorated patriots, including Medal of Honor winners and barrier-breaking generals, from Virginia's military bases. The twist? Their families weren't even told, learning from the press instead. This isn't just about names on signs, it's about the values America chooses to honor and who we leave behind. Earlier this month, Secretary Pete Hegseth announced a plan to change the names of 3 Virginia military bases.
Thank you. Mr. Secretary, earlier this month you announced a plan to change the name of 3 Virginia military bases to restore the names of Confederate-era generals on those bases. You researched to find brave American soldiers with the same last names, Lee, Hill, and Pickett, who had not fought for the Confederacy and declared that those Confederate adjacent names would be restored. The problem is that you had to strip away the names of 4 amazing people that the Pentagon and local communities had chosen to honor at the Virginia bases. Van Barfoot, he was a Mississippi native, Mr. Chair, who came to Fort Pickett in the early 40s to train for war. He fought all over Europe in World War II. He won the Congressional Medal of Honor for his bravery. Leading his platoon in southern Italy, he killed 10 of the enemy, captured 17 more, and escorted 2 wounded Americans 1,700 yards to safety under enemy fire. Stayed in the Army for another 34 years, seeing action in both the Korean and the Vietnam Wars, and being assigned as the Army liaison to the Virginia National Guard at Fort Pickett. Long after he retired, he maintained his tie to the fort and to the Virginia National Guard. I was at the naming ceremony, where this base, to which he had devoted much of his life, was named in his honor. His family was there, and they were so proud. Arthur Gregg served in the Army for more than 30 years, first African-American to reach the rank of brigadier general, first to reach the rank of lieutenant general, began as an enlisted, eventually decided to become a commissioned officer, went to Fort Lee for quartermaster training, quickly rose through the ranks as an instructor, even though he was not allowed to go to the officers' club because of the color of his skin. He finished his career in 1979 as the director of all Army logistics operations around the world. He stayed near Fort Lee in retirement, raised his family there, and was a continuous beloved presence until his death last summer at 96. He was actually at the renaming ceremony with his family in 2022 at this place that meant so much to him. Charity Adams. Charity Adams was an Army officer during World War II, the first African-American woman allowed to join the WACs. She was the commanding officer of the 6888th Central Postal Directory Battalion, a unique battalion composed primarily of African-American women, making sure that American GIs in Europe got their mail during World War II. Our colleagues Jackie Rosen and Jerry Moran successfully passed a bill in 2022 giving the 6888 the Congressional Gold Medal. Charity Adams was the highest-ranking African-American woman in the military at the end of World War II. Her family was at the dedication of Fort Gregg Adams, named in honor of these 2 trailblazing logistics leaders. They were so proud. Finally, Mary Walker, the only woman ever to receive the Congressional Medal of Honor. She graduated from Syracuse Medical School in 1855. She tried to join the Union Army as a surgeon, was turned away because she was a woman. But the need was so great, she eventually got hired at a military hospital in Washington and then was deployed as an Army surgeon with the Army of the Cumberland and the 52nd Ohio Infantry, becoming the first female surgeon in the U.S. Army. She served all over Virginia, including the place where the base is now named after her. She frequently crossed battle lines to treat civilians and even treated Confederate soldiers. She was captured, a prisoner of war in Richmond, until a prisoner relief president, Andrew Johnson, gave her the Congressional Medal of Honor after the Civil War. Why did you decide that these 4 patriots were not worthy enough to have their names on a base?
Well, Senator, as you know, this was never about the names of the bases they were renamed to.
So you don't challenge the worthiness?
Restoring all bases to their original name, because we're not about erasing history.
Okay, you don't care about their military record. You wanted to restore the Confederate names. When you called the Gregg family to tell them that their dad's name was no longer going to be on the base, what was their reaction?
Senator, the Army notified them of that.
You didn't call any of the families, and I've spoken with the families, and the families were called by the press. That's how they learned about this. They learned about it from the press. You didn't call the Barfoot family, the Gregg family, and you didn't call the Adams family. I told the families I'd ask you about this today. In fact, two of General Gregg's granddaughters, Avery and Sydney, are right here in the audience, and I want to ask you this as I close. While you announced that these brave men and women's names would be stripped from the Virginia bases, no orders to that effect have been received by the base commanders. In light of the patriotic service of Van Barfoot, Arthur Gregg, Charity Adams, and Mary Walker, I'd like to ask you simply not to issue the orders changing the names of these Virginia bases. These families, my Commonwealth, are very proud of these heroes, very satisfied with these names, and ask you not to change them. Will you honor these exemplary patriots and keep their worthy names in places on the bases they loved and where they served?
Well, Senator, we very much thank and appreciate them for their service, and we'll find ways to recognize them, but the orders will soon be going to those bases to change the names back to the original name that never should have been changed.
But you have the power to not send those orders. They haven't gone out yet, correct?
Thank you. Senator, your time has expired.
His approach? Restore the original Confederate-linked names, but find unrelated American soldiers with the same surnames who never fought for the Confederacy. On paper, it might sound like a clever workaround. In reality, it meant wiping away the names of 4 extraordinary individuals who had nothing to do with the Confederacy, and everything to do with real service, sacrifice, and progress. Tim Kaine wasn't having it. Sitting across from Hegseth, he pushed back hard, framing the decision as a step backward, not forward. He made it clear this wasn't about political correctness. It was about honoring the right people. And to drive his point home, he told the stories of those set to be erased. First, Van Barfoot, a Mississippi native who trained for war at Fort Pickett in the early 1940s. His heroism in southern Italy during World War II earned him the Congressional Medal of Honor. In one action alone, he killed 10 enemy soldiers, captured 17 more, and rescued 2 wounded Americans, hauling them 1,700 yards to safety under heavy fire. And that was just the start. He stayed in the Army for another 34 years, serving in Korea and Vietnam. After retiring, he remained connected to the Virginia National Guard and the fort itself, the place that eventually bore his name. To his family and community, that name on the base wasn't just a label, it was a legacy. Then came General Arthur Gregg, the first African American to reach both brigadier and lieutenant general in the U.S. Army. He started as an enlisted soldier and worked his way up, all while facing the sting of segregation. At Fort Lee, he trained as a quartermaster but wasn't even allowed in the officers' club because of the color of his skin. That didn't stop him. He rose to become the Army's top logistics officer worldwide. Even after retiring in 1979, he stayed in the area, raised his family there, and remained a respected figure in the community until his passing at 96. In 2022, he was honored in the renaming of Fort Gregg Adams. That moment wasn't just symbolic. It was a recognition of perseverance against all odds. Charity Adams was another trailblazer, the first African-American woman allowed to join the Women's Army Corps during World War II. She commanded the 6,888th Central Postal Directory Battalion, a unique unit made up mostly of African-American women, responsible for making sure U.S. soldiers in Europe got their mail. By the end of the war, she was the highest-ranking African-American woman in the military. Her leadership, alongside Gregg's, was celebrated in the dedication of Fort Gregg Adams, a tribute to 2 people whose contributions extended far beyond their military roles. And then there was Dr. Mary Edwards Walker, the only woman ever awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor, a Civil War surgeon who treated both Union and Confederate soldiers, often crossing battle lines to care for civilians. At a time when women weren't welcome in such roles, she broke through barriers with sheer determination. She was even captured as a prisoner of war in Richmond before being exchanged. Her name represented not only medical skill but moral courage. To Kaine, removing these names wasn't just disrespectful, it was rewriting history in the wrong direction. He also went after Hegseth for how the changes were handled. The families of these honorees didn't get a respectful call or official briefing. They found out from the press. In fact, 2 of General Gregg's granddaughters were sitting in the audience during the hearing. Kaine made it personal, asking Hegseth point-blank why he didn't pick up the phone himself. Hegseth's answer was evasive. He said the Army notified them, thanked the honorees for their service, but confirmed the orders would go out to restore the original names, implying those names never should have been changed in the first place. To Kaine, this was more than bureaucratic stubbornness. It was a choice to prioritize Confederate nostalgia over genuine American achievement. The exchange turned into a showdown. Kaine pressed the orders hadn't been sent yet, so there was still time to reverse course. He urged Hegseth to keep the current names, honoring the 4 patriots who had given so much to the country and the communities surrounding these bases. But Hegseth didn't budge. What Kaine made clear in that hearing is that this debate isn't just about tradition or history, it's about the story America chooses to talk about itself. Keeping Confederate-linked names, even with creative justifications, sends a message, and so does honoring figures like Barfoot, Gregg, Adams, and Walker. One version looks backward, clinging to a divided past. The other celebrates resilience, courage, and unity. In the end, Kaine's words were as much for the public as they were for Hegseth. He painted a picture of what's at stake, not just the signs on a military base, but the legacy we hand to future generations. Do we teach them that heroism comes in all forms, that breaking barriers matters, that service is more than battlefield glory? Or do we quietly undo that progress in the name of restoration? This wasn't a routine policy disagreement. It was a flashpoint in the ongoing battle over how the U.S. confronts its own history. And Kaine's pushback made one thing clear: erasing real heroes to re-elevate Confederate names isn't honoring history, it's rewriting it. The question is whether the public will accept that rewrite or demand better. So now it's over to you. Do you believe the military should preserve these names that celebrate unity and progress, or is restoring the so-called original names a way of preserving tradition? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. The next story we're covering takes this controversy even further, and trust me, you won't want to miss it.